Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here. Let us call this video Market Irrationality or some such thing. We're going to be talking about Charles II's video that he's posted just minutes ago, fresh off the press. You should go watch the whole thing. It's pretty good. I just need a little quote out of it. Let me see, a 10-second quote or so, and then about another 10-second quote, because he's got a couple really good thoughts. Then I'm going to take those and I'm going to show you how people think that cause these problems. And then we're going to go look at some website that wants to tell us that people are irrational. Okay, so you're not going to see a lot of me. Now we're going to go over here and we're going to go to Charles II. Now, have I succeeded? I think I've succeeded there. Charles II. Rationality and the market. Now, at 10 minutes and 47 seconds, he's just got a little bit here we want to listen to.
To the extent that there is an economy to speak of, it's because people are acting rational.
Right. So there may be irrational behavior. He gives the example of a man who gets a business and goes broke, and then he doesn't have his money anymore. So irrational behavior is the short term. So to the extent there's an economy, we're talking about rational long-term behavior. All right. We're just going to put that in our pocket. The economy is long-term behavior. If there is irrational behavior in the economy, it is short-term and it snuffs itself out. It puts itself out. Okay. Now we're going forward to 17 minutes and 10 seconds.
But the market, well, they have no answer to that because they don't understand that a market can only exist in the absence of force.
Okay, a market can only exist in the absence of force. He's talking about the anarchist fallacy, that you can drop the monopoly on force out of the picture and still have the market that you think. Now, the reason for that is because the use of physical force is anathema to rationality. A person can be rational only so far as they are able to do what they want without hurting other people. As long as they can't be hurt, then they can act rationally. Now, the point I want to make here is that's not a guarantee that people will act rationally. It's just an option. The free market does not work because everybody acts rationally all the time. The free market works because you can act rationally. All right? The free market does not work because it is rational. It works because there's the option for you to be rational, as opposed to, for say, example, Soviet Russia or Nazi Germany, where you are just forced to be irrational and the laws of supply and demand are ignored by the market and millions of people starve to death. So the important thing about the free market is not that it is magically rational. Okay? The important thing about the free market is that it leaves you the option to be rational. All right, now we go to this guy. This is Lefty Philosophy. And at 13 minutes and 43 seconds, we just have a 10-minute clip here we want to listen to him. What we're going to get from this guy is we're going to get the view of the man on the street today in Europe or in America. This is the general view of the general population today.
Living in like kind of your own bubble without asking other people or getting a sense of reality from a collective view of everybody else.
So we've got to get a collective view from everybody else. You don't want to live in your own little bubble of reality. Just in case you missed it, I'm going to rewind and let you hear him say it again. I've turned it up a little bit here.
Living in like kind of your own bubble without asking other people or getting a sense of reality from a collective view of everybody else.
Because you yourself could be mistaken, therefore go with the group. The group knows, all right? Now at 18 minutes and 13 seconds here.
How would we know that? You see, it's not. How would we know that? We would get the collective experience of everybody else around us and try.
All right, so check with the group, okay? Always check with the group because you yourself could be mistaken. But if you get a group's view, the group, they're probably good to go, right? but you yourself could be mistaken. Now, economicshelp.org, irrational behavior in economics. They have a little table here. Cognitive bias is irrational behavior when we make decisions based on irrational assumptions. Herding effect, following the wisdom of the crowds, irrational exuberance, getting carried away by an asset bubble. Now, these are just terrible examples. If this is the best they can do, then they are wrecked. These are, like I said, irrational behavior in the market's going to happen all the time. People are going to buy businesses, drive them into the ground, go broke, and go out of business. People are going to, Ben and Jerry's are going to exist, where they have their little social warrior thing that they do. These things are going to happen. It's not a guarantee that everyone will behave rationally. It is only the option that you can behave rationally. Now, with the herding effect here, let's say you see a bunch of guys like this here running around. They're all in a herd, and they're all looking at each other trying to decide what to do. You would look at that and you would say, oh, I see the herding effect going on over there. And you would figure out a way to herd them into some corral and get their money. Now, whether that's manufacturing little spinners, those little spinners that were the thing, all of a sudden you say, geez, I can make those for about 25 cents a piece in my factory in China, and I can sell them for $5 each. Are you kidding me? And so you start making them, and you're just taking advantage of the herding effect. So the source of the herding effect isn't irrationality. It isn't the economy. It isn't irrationality in the economy per se. It's irrationality in guys like this who think you should just look to your neighbor and follow him. And you get a whole bunch of people looking to their neighbor, and you can get carried away. Now, irrational exuberance comes from Greenspan and his term about the housing bubble, getting carried away by an asset bubble. Now, it's interesting that they give that as an example because the housing bubble was caused by government fiat. The government said to the banks, you guys seem to be very racist because 18% of the people in your areas are minorities and only 3% of your loans are going to minorities. You wouldn't want the government to think that you're racist, would you? So unless you want us to think that you're racist and fine you millions of dollars for being racist, unless you want that, you had better start loaning more to minorities. So the bank started loaning to minorities under threat of law. And they sold those loans as quick as they could get rid of them. They called them high leverage debt because the amount of money you buy the debt for is very small. The amount that it pays you is very big. And you just have to wait 20 or 30 years for these loans to mature. Problem is, banks knew that those loans were not going to be paid back. Those were minorities that could not get loans unless the government made a law. And until the government made a law, they weren't going to get loans. And after the government made a law, they were going to get the loans, but lose the houses anyway and just cost everybody a bunch of money. So irrational exuberance refers to the government interfering in the economy. Thanks, but no thanks. All right. Sunk cost fallacy, attachment to past spending. Oh, like a businessman who just keeps putting money into a business that's sinking. Like I said, it's not a guarantee that everyone's going to be rational. It's just the guarantee that rationality, if you do go be rational, you can keep the results of your labor. That's what a free economy is. That's what a free market is. Consuming more than we want to. That's strange. We want to stop consuming the Kit Kat, but we eat the whole thing. See, but these are weak examples. Okay, present bias. Choosing short-term pleasure and ignoring long-term costs, for example, drugs. Yeah, well, that's your opinion of that. That's everybody's opinion. Whether or not you're going to live 5 years or 50 years, whether you're going to get in a car wreck, if you abstain from drug use your whole life and die when you're 50 of some sort of, bus crash or something, and you say, I'm not going to do drugs because I want to live to a ripe old age and I want to have a healthy brain and so on and so forth. And you died way before that was an issue. Okay. That's maybe not a good example because I don't really advocate drug use. But, insofar as caffeine or cigarettes are a drug, is it really irrational to use something which does you damage, but your life is finite? How long do you want to live? And maybe you think that it adds to the pleasure in your life, short term as it is, 30, 40, 50 years. Okay, so these are just crappy examples that are psychoanalyzing people in some cases. I mean, this is just junk. Discrimination, disliking people for irrational reasons. The nice thing about a free economy is it doesn't define shit like that. It leaves that up to the individuals. And if the people around in the society don't like a certain group, that might force that group to change or withdraw. You know, like when they didn't like the Irish because the Irish were loud and drunk and violent. So nobody wanted them around. So they were shunned. And guess what? The Irish changed. They stopped being so loud and rude and violent, and they started drinking in a more reasonable way. So sometimes we need to be able to ban certain groups from our polite society in order to change the way that they behave. And once they behave differently, they'll sneak back in and nobody will even notice. And that's what the Irish did. Okay, so this is all a bunch of junk. This guy here is an example of why these things happen. And when they do happen, gentlemen like this, who are rational and long-term, can take advantage of all of those knuckleheads. And that's what I advise you to do, ladies and gentlemen. Don't go around complaining that some people are irrational in the economy. See them, find them, know what they're going to do next, and take advantage of them. Now, I have purchased some Bitcoin. Not because I believe it's brilliant, but I think it is a finite trading platform, and to buy space on that trading platform costs X amount of money, and it's just going to get more expensive over time. I don't think you should go buy it necessarily. If you do, you're probably going to make some money on it, especially if you're patient. You could probably make more money in other ways. I don't know. I just saw it as a secure place to park some money. So I put a little bit of money into it. Now, since I bought into it, some of the money I put in has doubled. And some of the money I put in is sitting right at the price where it was. So I'm up a little bit overall. Not a lot, though. And it's been there for a year. So to go up a little bit, not a lot, for a year, this is a calculation that I made just based on the fact that Congress passed some law that recognized Bitcoin in some way as a security or something like that. I don't even know what it was. But I said, okay, up till now, it's been a black market thing. Now I, as some regular Joe off the street who doesn't have a lot of cash, I'm willing to put a little money into it now that I know that the federal government is willing to give it legal recognition. Now, since then, it has become more well-behaved. So I don't know if I got in, if it was misbehaved because the government wasn't in it or what. But here's an example of what, 20 or 30 or 40 years from now, people are going to look back and call it the irrationality of the Bitcoin thing. The point is that in the heat of the moment, everybody does what they think is best for themselves. Even the businessman who is irrational and goes broke by putting too much money into his lost cause, he thinks that he might get some business next week. Things might turn around. Fred across the way might go broke first. He might get a new employee who comes through and has some new ideas and can help him revamp. So he thinks he's being irrational. Okay? So everybody does their best to be rational. Now, you get some nincompoop statist philosopher off the street now who writes some textbook and comes in and does Monday night quarterbacking after the fact and says, look at these guys, they were being irrational. The South Sea bubble. Now, it's probably a bad example to look at economies outside the United States of America, or at least, something that has some sort of a facsimile of the legalistic framework that America has. Economies outside of that are a bad example, because imagine you're trapped in a concentration camp and you happen to have got, several little gold bars that are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you're looking for an investment and you're in a concentration camp, right? That's a shitty place to look to say, is this irrational behavior for him to invest in this way? You live in some society where the king oversees all the potential for investment and where all potential investment is taxed to the hilt. and so on, and you see everybody running like lefty philosophy there. You got to check with the group and make sure, because you could have a mistake by yourself. So you don't use your own judgment. You see that all the millionaires up and down your street are all buying into this thing. Well, you would look like a goddamn fool if you didn't, wouldn't you? Lefty philosophy would tell you you're a goddamn fool. He would say, check with the group. They're all buying into the South Sea Trading Company. Why don't you buy into the South Sea Trading Company? The group agrees. Okay? So that's the source of it, is knuckleheads like him. What you should do, if you really are in the middle of the South Sea trading bubble, is short the South Sea Company, right? That's the rational thing to do, if you're clear-headed enough to see through and see what's going on. So there you are. Not contradicting or fighting against Mr. 2, as you noticed. I was simply expanding on what he said, but showing that the problems in our economy come from idiotic morons like lefty philosophy. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you appreciate what I do, please throw me some money on Patreon. I'm pretty sure you wouldn't do this 3 or 5 days a week for free. So please don't expect me to do it 3 or 5 days a week for free. Google and YouTube won't allow me to make any money off of traffic anymore. So now it's up to my fans to pay me if you guys want me to do this. If you support me and I can get a bigger following, then it'll feed on itself. So go to Patreon, skip your Starbucks for today, and instead of buying Nikes, buy something a little less expensive, and send Mr. Cropper 10 or 20 bucks. And let's try to get my Patreon to around 500 or 600. 800 would be nice, and then I wouldn't have to worry about going back and doing my part-time job. But until I get there, I don't know. So jump on the Patreon before it's too late, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Copper out.